Good morning and welcome to our coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Coming up today, 900 U.S. troops heading to Middle East to bolster defenses as attacks surge. Israel Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Israel does not seek wider war. Gaza invasion will come at the right time. Plus, Palestinian ambassador to United Nations defends latest Gaza death toll figures. All that and more in the course of today's coverage. But first, we begin with the heavily armed Hezbollah, who've been engaged in daily exchanges of fire with Israeli forces along the frontier of the northern border since war broke out between Israel and Hamas. And even today, multiple fires are seen ablaze at the border as tension between the two nations continue to fester during a deepening crisis in the region. The same goes for the Israel-Gaza border this morning. The United Nations peacekeeping force is working with Lebanese authorities to extinguish wildfires that have spread for several kilometers in South Lebanon after being started by gunfire along the Lebanese-Israeli border. Israeli forces recently carried out their biggest Gaza ground attack in the war with Hamas as anger grew in the Arab world over Israel's relentless bombardment of the Palestinian territory. About 900 additional U.S. troops are heading to the Middle East or have newly arrived there to bolster air defenses to protect U.S. personnel amidst a surge in attacks in the region by Iran-affiliated groups against the United States. This is the information released from the Pentagon, adding that the U.S. troops have been attacked at least 12 times in Iraq and 4 times in Syria in the past week. The U.S. Central Command says 24 American military personnel were wounded last week in a series of drone attacks at American bases in Iraq and in Syria.
Part of our efforts to deter a broader conflict and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities, I can confirm that since our initial force posture announcement, approximately 900 troops have subsequently deployed or are in the process of deploying to the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. These include forces that have been on prepare to deploy orders and which are deploying from the continental United States. Deployed and deploying units include a terminal high-altitude area defense battery from Fort Bliss, Texas, Patriot batteries from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Patriot and Avenger batteries from Fort Liberty, North Carolina, and associated air defense headquarters elements from Fort Bliss and Fort Cavados, Texas. While I won't talk specific deployment locations for these forces, I can confirm that they are not going to Israel and that, again, they are intended to support regional deterrence efforts and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities.
Israel Defense Minister Yoav Gallant is giving the assurance that Israel has no interest in war with any other foes other than Hamas, and that its ground operations in Gaza will come when the conditions are right. Asked about the ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, Mr. Gallant says the maneuver will come, and the day it'll happen is not far off. It'll happen when the conditions are right in order to strike a mass organization. And after we complete our task with fire, when this will happen, you will see it and understand its power. Israel has carried out weeks of intense bombardment of the densely populated Strip following the October 7 Hamas attack on Israel communities. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby criticized the visit to Moscow by a Hamas delegation on Thursday. The delegation visited Moscow for talks on the release of foreign hostages, including Russian citizens that Hamas is holding in Gaza. Russia has ties to all key players in the Middle East, including Israel, Iran, the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas, the group controlling Gaza. Moscow has repeatedly blamed the current crisis on the failure of U.S. diplomacy and called for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and the resumption of talks aimed at finding a peace settlement. Hamas released its own statement in which it commended the efforts of Russia President Vladimir Putin and the foreign ministry to end what it calls the crimes of Israel that are supported by the West.
I can't speak for their travel habits or with our conversations with the Russians. Our message to any other nation around the world is this is not a time to be supporting Hamas's ability to continue to kill Israelis, and it's certainly not a time, or any nation out there that wants to be involved should look for ways to be involved to help Israel defend itself and to help get humanitarian assistance in. So we'll see what comes of the conversation.
Meanwhile, EU leaders have called for pauses in Israeli bombing and Hamas rocket attacks to get humanitarian aid into Gaza after days of wrangling that highlighted divisions within this bloc over the broader Israel-Palestinian conflict. In a declaration agreed at a summit in Brussels, the leaders of the Union's 27 nations expressed the gravest concern for the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza. The summit was the leaders' first in-person meeting since the deadly October 7 assault in Israel by the terrorist Hamas, which prompted Israel to bombard and blockade Hamas-run Gaza.
Israel is a democracy attacked by Hamas, a terrorist organization. Israel has the right of self-defense in line with international law and international humanitarian law. There was a strong call from the leaders that Hamas must immediately release all hostages without any preconditions. And it was clear that through its terrorist activities, Hamas is also bringing harm to the Palestinian people. Hamas has provoked a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. For the Commission, it's very important that we continue to intensify our efforts to deal with the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The aid needs to reach Gaza unhindered and quickly, and I think it is important that we acknowledge the pain and the suffering of the Israeli people and the families that lost relatives or where relatives are hostages. If we want to speak to Israel and influence Israel. And therefore, it is so important that you first listen if you want to be listened to.
Meanwhile, Israel's United Nations envoy showed the 193-member General Assembly a brief video on Thursday that he says showed a Hamas fighter trying to decapitate a man with a garden tool during the Palestinian terrorist attack, that is the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7 on Israel. Ambassador Gilad Erdan told diplomats the victim had seen in the few seconds of footage he played for them on a tablet was not Israeli or Jewish, but an agricultural worker from Thailand. Mr. Erdan's comments were delivered as the Assembly began a two-day meeting on the Middle East on Thursday. It's due to vote on Friday on a resolution drafted by Arab states that call for a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. At each seat in the hall at United Nations headquarters, Israeli diplomats placed a printout of a QR code with the title "Free Gaza from Hamas, scan to see Hamas atrocities," linked to photos and videos of the October 7 attack.
I have seen much footage over the past weeks that will be seared into my mind forever. But there is one sight that I keep on seeing when I try to sleep. In the video, one can see a terrible injured civilian, bloodied yet alive, laying on the ground as a Hamas savage screaming, "Allahu Akbar," repeatedly pummels the man's neck with a garden hoe in order to decapitate him. The man on the ground is an agricultural worker from Thailand. He's not Israeli, he's not Jewish. He was merely alive trying to make a living for his family. But he was decapitated with a blunt gardening tool. Horrifying. Israel is not at war with human beings. We are at war with monsters. Here is the video. My mission distributed and will continue to distribute QR codes with a direct link to files where you can see this horror and many other Hamas atrocities. What you see here are not pictures from Auschwitz, but Israelis raped, butchered, and burned alive.
I don't have videos to show you. We respect the dead too much. We respect the pain of their families too much to show videos. But check out your mobiles. Thousands of videos depicting the abomination, the horror, the inhumanity to which thousands of Palestinians are being subjected and have been subjected. Israel is making Gaza a perpetual hell on earth. The trauma will haunt generations to come.
Let me address all those who have in these past few days explained why one should not call for a ceasefire. How can representatives of states explain how horrible it is that 1,000 Israelis were killed and not feel the same outrage when 1,000 Palestinians are now killed every day? 1,000 Palestinians killed every day. Why not feel a sense of urgency to end their killing? Nothing can justify war crimes, crime against humanity, and genocide. Nothing can justify the killing of a single Palestinian child. Nothing. Nothing at all. Why not feel a sense of urgency to end our killing? Nothing can, as I said, justify war crimes. You are setting us back 80 years by trying to justify what Israel is doing now. How naive one has to be, or how hypocritical to pretend they don't know Israel is voluntarily killing Palestinian civilians.
Now, the health ministry in Gaza has issued a 212-page document which contains the names and ID members of more than 7,000 Palestinians killed during the Israeli bombardment of the enclave. The ministry acted after U.S. President Joe Biden and the Israeli military questioned the casualty figures issued by authorities in Gaza, which is controlled by the Hamas movement. In a press conference held in Geneva on Thursday, the Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations, Ibrahim Kraishi, defended the latest death toll figures from Gaza, according to Hamas-run health ministry, and criticized President Biden for questioning the numbers. Take a listen.
We have the names and the addresses and the age of all those Palestinian martyrs. And now it comes to Biden, he have no confidence on anything, even on himself, because one time he said that he saw the pictures, after 2 hours he didn't saw. When he went to Israel to visit Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, he said this bombardment on Al-Ahli hospital, it's the other side. Then they discovered that it's not the same. So yesterday his statement that there is some civilians, but the numbers are not accurate, we will see. And I ask the High Commissioner to ask the Israeli side to provide for him the names of the Israeli casualties. They are talking now about 1,400. What we are talking, we will bring all the names because we will follow. We will not leave those families who totally exterminated. We have to follow later for their compensation and for their right.
Now, the spokesman for the U.S. National Security Council, Mr. John Kirby, says he saw no evidence that the family of an Al Jazeera journalist in Gaza was targeted specifically and killed by Israel in response to the network's coverage in the region. Al Jazeera Media Network claims the wife, son, and daughter of one of its correspondents in Gaza were killed on Wednesday night in an Israeli airstrike in the Hamas-run Enclave's health ministry, according to the Hamas-run Enclave's health ministry, which said also killed at least 25 people. There were no immediate comments from the Israeli military on the strike, which the Al Jazeera network claims hit the area where Wael al-Dadu's family had fled to following an Israeli warning about a Gaza ground incursion. Al Jazeera reported other members of Mr. Dadu's family were buried under the rubble. The network broadcast live footage of Mr. Dadu crying as he saw family members lying lifeless in hospital.
The president doesn't believe that targeting journalists at all in any way is appropriate, but I can't speak to the specifics of that case. I've seen the reporting, and certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. I mean, that's just horrible. But I can't speak to the circumstances in which that strike occurred. But make no mistake, the president believes strongly in what you all do for a living and how you need to be able to do that freely and securely. And we know that all of you take great risks sometimes in doing that job. So you're asking me in the context of like, do we have some kind of beef with Al Jazeera?
Yes.
I'll let the secretary and their staff speak to his conversations in the region. I won't do that. We recognize Al Jazeera as a valuable voice and an outlet that has incredible reach in the region and beyond. I don't need to tell you that. It's truly a global network, and we value the work that you do.
One quick question, just because the Committee to Protect Journalists says that at least 24 journalists have been killed in Gaza trying to cover this story. Are you concerned that Israel is trying to silence journalists who are trying to tell both sides of this story, including our Al Jazeera Arabic bureau chief?
I've not seen any indication whatsoever that Israel is going after journalists, in particular because of them trying to tell the story. I've seen absolutely zero evidence of that. That's an unfounded allegation.
Coming up on the program, we'll be speaking to an expert at the Center for Global Studies Strategy when we come back after the break, Dr. Olena Sneger. She is speaking to us from Florence, Italy. And also, still ahead, UN World Food Program Executive Director Cindy McCain criticizes strict checks at Rafah crossing. And now, welcome back. You're in the second stretch of our coverage of the Israel-Hamas war as the crisis in the Middle East continues. Joining us on the program is an expert at the Center for Global Studies Strategy, Ukraine, Dr. Olena Sneger. Dr. Sneger is speaking to us virtually from Florence in Italy. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Keeping in mind that your country, Ukraine, is still under the Russian invasion, still fighting the Russians, and that conflict continues to go on, how disheartening is it for you to see that the Middle East crisis as well has erupted and Israel and Hamas are at each other's throats in this manner? You heard what the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations said when he recounted an ordeal of a Thailand agricultural worker whose head was being decapitated by a Hamas terrorist with a garden tool, a hoe. We've also heard from the Hamas Ministry of Health that 7,000 innocent Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli bombardments. How are you feeling at this time?
Well, it's obviously horrible to see these pictures and to read this news, though we Ukrainians, it's hard to say, but we maybe got used to it already because we have seen these atrocities already committed on our territory, on our land, and we have seen those who follow international experts who follow Syrian war and atrocities of Wagner group. Those experts also have seen such kind of atrocities in other countries committed by, I would call them war criminals, nothing else. So yeah, it feels terrible, but we have to remember that our war and this war in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. I wouldn't call it between Israel and Palestine. I still believe that the peace solution is possible. These are just the parts or the segments or the beginning of the bigger range of conflicts all around the globe. Because, yes, everything started from maybe even from Syrian war, but escalated with Russian war in Ukraine. And war, full-scale war, always makes people and societies and countries more radical, less sensitive to violence, and makes also some leaders, I would say, authoritarian, and those who would like to be or to have more power than they have. So those leaders, they think that they can allow themselves more and they can play very risky game, putting under the risk the lives of their own people and the peace in their own countries. So I'm really sad to say it, but we have to be realistic. I think that we will witness in near future more conflicts and more wars all around the globe. And yes, the international community really needs to do something, or at least to try to find a solution to stop this war between Israel and Hamas.
Are you saying that in the beginning of your response, you said that there were atrocities committed by the Wagner group against the Ukrainians at this level? Was it at this level of violence?
You can read, those who are interested can read reports, UN reports from UN investigators and International Criminal Court investigators, those who came to Ukrainian deoccupied territories immediately after they were deoccupied, and they have made their own investigations, and those reports contain horrible information, really horrible information about torture and about rapes of civilians and even children, not only by Russian Wagner group, but also by Russian militaries. So, and the conclusion is that there was an order from Russian headquarters to commit such atrocities because it's a kind of form of terror for civilians, to make civilians obey, to break the resilience of civilians. Yes, Russians decapitated people in Ukraine, and those people were alive, and those people were begging not to do it. And we have seen these videos because they do it, Russians do it, and then they put these videos online so that the Ukrainians can see it to make us suffer more. Russians have castrated Ukrainian soldiers, and they have put these videos online, and we all have seen it. Yes, Russians commit horrible atrocities. I don't know why, but these war crimes are just part of normal Russian war tactics on the ground.
That's really hideous. That's just terrible. What do you now therefore make of the U.S. National Security spokesperson John Kirby criticizing the visit of a Hamas delegation to Russia yesterday? Does that legitimize Hamas in the eyes of the world?
I wouldn't say that this legitimizes Hamas in the eyes of the world, or at least of that world that condemns such atrocities against civilians. I would say that this legitimizes Hamas in the eyes of those, as I said, regimes and those leaders who would like to have more power and who don't put the human being in the center of the state policy, of their policy, but who put their own power in the center of the state policy, and who are ready to commit crimes in order to achieve their personal goals. So this is a very good example for them that it doesn't matter what kind of crime you commit, but then there will be a leader, a big country who will always embrace you and who will support you because they also do it the same. They stick to the same policy because this is the only way for them to achieve their goals. Not open competition on the fair rules, according to fair rules, but just on the rules based on power, yes, or on the ability to make as much terror as possible.
Now that the United States has announced through their Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin that they have struck targets in the Middle East and Syria in response to attacks against United States assets in the Middle East, and they are deploying soldiers and security forces, 900 in number, ready to deploy, even some from the United States. For those who have been afraid that the Russia-Ukraine war could lead to World War III, a wider conflict, now that this has happened, is there a real and clear and present danger that this war can lead to a world war? One of the recent people that said that is Elon Musk, world's richest man. He talked about it just the other day. And many concerned parties have been saying this, that, look, the Russian invasion is not something that you just turn up your nose at. You should take it seriously. Now, Israel-Hamas, take it seriously. Is there a danger that this can become a wider conflict?
Well, it depends if how many other countries or what countries would like or would consider involvement in this war. If, for example, China would consider putting on the ground its Chinese peacekeepers, or Iran would dare to conduct some strong missile attacks, or any other alliances, or even Russia will step in officially, then the risk grows, the risk becomes very high. But still, I really hope that the UN, at least there is still one mechanism, one instrument that hasn't been used, and it's United for Peace instrument of the United Nations that can be adopted through their resolution of the General Assembly. And probably through this instrument there would be a possibility to deploy UN investigators and a UN peacekeeping mission on the ground. So yeah, let's observe, but the situation is really worrying.
Yes, indeed. We'll leave it there, and we thank you for your insight and your views this morning, Dr. Olena Sneger. She is an expert at the Center for Global Studies Strategy in Ukraine, who joined us from Florence, Italy. Many thanks for being with us this morning.
Have a good day. Goodbye.
UN World Food Programme Executive Director Cindy McCain is criticizing the strict checks on aid trucks at the Rafah crossing from Egypt into Gaza. During an interview, Ms. McCain called the bureaucracy insane and says the rigorous procedures slow down the flow of aid, which prior to the conflict escalation used to see approximately 400 trucks daily.
We have a large amount of trucks waiting at the gate that are loaded with food. I know the question has been, well, how will it wind up in the hands of Hamas? We've been in Gaza for years, WFP has, and we have people on the ground. That's all they do, is make sure that the food goes to where it's supposed to go. So I can tell you we have the systems in place, we have certainly our people in place, we have other methods to make sure that our cash-based transfers indeed go to exactly who they're supposed to go to. But it's a war zone. Things are going to happen. And so I can't say 100% that nothing's going to wind up in the hands of the bad guys. There's no 100% guarantee, but we are doing our very best. And what I say to these folks is if you don't want to give funding to people who are starving to death, then do it for national security. This is a national security issue. And so we can think of it in two ways. But mass migration is not something Europe wants, nor does Jordan or or Egypt, any of the neighboring countries around there. And so this is if we can feed them for now, right where they're at, that's what we need to be doing.
Meanwhile, the UN agency providing aid to Palestinian civilians in Gaza is warning that it may have to shut down operations shortly if no fuel reaches the enclave, amidst an increasingly desperate need for shelter, water, food, and medical supplies. The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees says it needs fuel urgently to maintain life-saving humanitarian operations in the Islamist Hamas enclave that has been under Israeli bombardment for almost 3 weeks. Israel has refused to let in fuel with aid shipments, saying it could be seized by Hamas. Protesters outside the Brussels venue where EU leaders are meeting say the statements did not go far enough on Thursday. Hundreds of protesters gathered outside waving placards calling for a halt in Israel's bombing campaign in response to the October 7 attack and said EU leaders should go further. The EU leaders are calling for humanitarian pauses to allow aid into Gaza. Meanwhile, demonstrators also gathered in Wall Street in New York City to express solidarity with the Palestinian people in Gaza, carrying banners, signs, and Palestinian flags. Protesters shouted chants demanding justice for thousands of civilians dead and wounded amidst the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. NYPD officers set up metal barriers to hold the pro-Palestinian demonstrations while the crowd marched. Now, I would like to speak to former Speaker of Rivers State House of Assembly, Right Honorable Ikunyi Owaji Ibani, joining us virtually from Port Harcourt in Rivers State in the south of Nigeria. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Now, concerning the terror attacks in Israel on October the 7th, Nigerians such as you and I can identify with this because of the terror attacks that Nigeria suffered at the hands of Boko Haram. Concerning the hostages taken, we can also identify with this because of the schoolgirls kidnapped from Chibok and Dapchi. Leah Sharibu is still in captivity. There's still a number of girls that are still in captivity of Boko Haram. They have not been released. This mirrors or echoes what's happening in Israel and Gaza, where 224 hostages have been taken, many of them children, elderly, soldiers, young people. What's your position on the Israel-Hamas war?
Well, thank you, my brother, for having me this morning. But first, let me say this, that every conflict, every war diminishes the human landscape. And that as human beings, when you seek happiness, also place others in your shoes, that if you want happiness, also seek the happiness of others. It is by so doing that we can extend compassion to our neighbors, our friends, and others who are not within our sight or our reach. Having said that, I want to lay two grounds for my discussion this morning, because it saddens me most times when I stay glued to my television set and I see blood flowing, blood of the innocent, the children, the elderly, the women, and even those who are not supposed to leave planet Earth now. I will rely on two basic principles of philosophers of old. First, the Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. And I quote, having compassion is something that should not be preached in holy places. It's something that when you do it, you are putting others in your shoes. And when you extend compassion to people, you are not necessarily seeking the happiness of the beneficiary, but that of the benefactor. End of quote. And it is this position that the Tibetan spiritual leader adopted in non-violence as a non-violence theorist to enter into a relationship in spite of what China has been doing to Tibet. Two, let me say this, one of the greatest of war philosophy, Sun Tzu, let me quote him. He said that true victory is victory over aggression. Victory that respects the enemy's basic humanity. And that renders further conflict unnecessary. Any victory that does not respect basic humanity cannot render any conflict or any future conflict unnecessary. You must, even in victory, respect basic humanity. Having said this, the issue of the conflict between Hamas and Israel, or the Palestinians and the Israelis, is not starting today. It has a very long history. The graveyard of political history is full with such graves of death, blood, found in such locations, in cemeteries all over the world where political history is written and documented. You know, it's a long history between the Palestinians and the Israelis. What Hamas did on the 7th of October is a sad one for them to have carried out such a preemptive attack on Israel, knowing that they cannot defend themselves in the long run. It is violence. It should be condemned. Because you remember right from 1917, when the Balfour Declaration was made, that was the proclamation that Israel, the state of Israel, will now become, the Israelis will have a place in the region or the territory of Palestine. Let me also quote part of that declaration, the Balfour Declaration of 1917. His Majesty's government now will view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Right from that 1917, when this declaration was made by the British, you know, the territory was a British mandate. That was the beginning, given my memory in terms of historical facts. That was the beginning, and from then, cessation of hostilities and terrorism, all manner of violence has not stopped. You have seen videos of what happened on the 7th of October. Every right-thinking human being, every person who does not believe in violence should be able to condemn. That is a preemptive strike from Hamas that does not have a standing army. And you know, the repercussion in retaliation in international diplomacy or international relations, retaliatory action is always worse and greater than the initial one. That is what you are finding today. As Nigerians, we have experienced violence in different forms, in different shades. The Boko Haram issue is a case in point. You talk of even the bandits. After the Boko Haram, you talk of the bandits. Kidnapping, killing people, maiming people, destroying properties in Nigeria. We have experienced, we know the pain that people go through. That's why it is not good that people engage in violence. No matter the hostility, there is always a window open for people to dialogue. It is this aspect that Hamas is forgetting. I thought after Yasser Arafat, of course, if you remember the Madrid agreement and the Oslo agreement, which now took the Palestinian people to a level of peace negotiation and successes recorded. But you find out after then, nothing has happened. Maybe, and given the trend in demography, if you look at the demographic trend in Palestine, in Gaza, in West Bank, you have youth who did not even participate, who did not understand what their fathers, like Yasser Arafat and others, did to get to that level in the Oslo agreement and the Madrid agreement. That is why you are seeing what you are seeing today. They take up arms like Hamas. Of course, if I want to give you the background of Hamas, you know it's a violent organization. But we should be able to know, especially the United Nations, that solving the Palestinian question, Israeli-Palestinian question, is one question United Nations must solve to bring peace to the Middle East and to bring peace of mind to those who are not resident in the Middle East. Otherwise, if the United Nations cannot solve this Palestinian question, it means the essence, the very essence for the establishment or the formation of the United Nations is defeated. You know, before the United Nations came into existence, it was the League of Nations. When the League of Nations was not able to perform, given the outbreak of the Second World War, of course, you have to bring in the United Nations for the international peace and security of the world. What is happening in Middle East today between the Israelis and Hamas is not bringing peace to the world. I condemn it in totality. I want my own opinion. I want the Israelis and Hamas, the Palestinians, because Hamas is not supposed to be the pole, it's not supposed to occupy pole position, given the previous agreements, the Oslo agreement and the Madrid agreement. It's supposed to be the Palestinian National Authority with a chairman now, which is Mahmoud Abbas, after the death of Yasser Arafat. So what is the issue? I know for sure, given my own knowledge of what happens between Israelis and Hamas, that when people engage in violence, they must have gotten to a point where they feel there is no window open to them for them to come out, wriggle out and engage in discussion. But I still see prospect. I still see prospect in what is happening in the Middle East today. Why? Why do I say so? I say so because the Israelis and the Palestinians, they have occupied these areas for a long time. So the person you wake up in the morning to see is your brother, is your friend. You can't claim to have another place where you now go and make a new home. So
pardon the interruption, right on. Pardon the interruption. Let me come in here. Pardon the interruption. We'll have to let you go. Just before we let you go, do you think, you brought up the United Nations, do you think that their position has been weakened by Antonio Guterres' comments concerning the Israel-Hamas conflict the other day, which has caused the Israelis to call for his resignation, saying that he made a comment that seemed to justify Hamas's actions on October the 7th. How do you estimate the UN Secretary General's handling of this conflict thus far? Very quickly.
Well, the UN Secretary general. For me, when I saw him trying to defend his earlier position, I think it was not necessary. Having said something that Hamas didn't do this in a vacuum, that means there is something lying somewhere. It should have been bold enough to state, because the United Nations is for everyone. It's for every country. It's an organization that takes care of interstate relationship and even extra-state relationship or conflict. He would have stood by saying that, having said this, that we should move ahead. What is the moving ahead? Is to reopen the peace process that has been left for some time to just to lie low. Instead of reopening, he now went ahead to defend himself. He didn't say what they were saying, that he said that he was misrepresented. That is not true leadership. True leadership, you should be able to look at the issue. What is to be done now? The Palestinians, what they are saying, they need a Palestinian state, the state of Palestine. The Israelis, what are they saying? Is it that they are not agreeing to the state of Palestine? Or is it the capital, which is East Jerusalem, according to the Palestinians, that they want East Jerusalem to be their capital? That is the problem. But something must be done as United Nations, as Secretary General. That is why he is here. He should not behave as an ostrich. He should not behave as someone who cannot do the work.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
To tell us again that, look at what I said. I said this, I said that. But you said that the Hamas did not operate in a vacuum. That means there is something in the can. That is what you should tell us. You open up as Secretary General and let the world know and how to proceed on this.
We'll leave it there. Indeed, a very thorny.
It's very important.
Yes, that is so obvious, and we thank you for your historical treatise as well on the entire debacle that is happening in the Middle East. Former Speaker of the River State House of Assembly, Right Honorable Ikunyi Owaje Ibani, who joined us from Port Harcourt. Thank you for joining us.
In concluding, let me say this.
We have to let you go. We have to let you go. We have to let you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, the families of hostages held in the Gaza Strip headed to Capitol Hill on Thursday to tell the stories of loved ones taken from Israel as they called for help in returning them home. Israel says more than 1,400 people were killed and more than 220 hostages were taken after mass gunmen carried out surprise attacks in southern Israel on October the 7th.
Specifically for my grandson, who was holed up in his quarters. He managed to stay alive by hiding in the safe room, only by his ability to hold the handle of the door closed. And what was between him and a most certain death was 2 inches of the door. Fortunately, the terrorists gave up at some point, ransacked his room, set the room on fire, and left, leaving him behind. Further during the day, the Hamas terrorists got to my daughter's house and abducted her and set the house on fire. They killed the dog.
On October 7th, Saturday morning, 11:23 minutes in the morning, I got a text message from my mother saying, "Dad has been kidnapped by terrorists. I'm alone in the safe room. Can't talk."
Our son Omer is actually a 9/11 baby. He was born shortly after 9/11. Actually, my wife was pregnant, 9 months pregnant, as she was crossing the bridge on foot, and I picked her up. And last time we talked to him was Friday night, when he told us that they were working really hard. The previous few weeks, he was looking for a quiet time and a quiet, peaceful weekend. And as we know, that wasn't the case.
And finally, in an emotional news conference held by the Greater Los Angeles area office of the Council on American Islamic Relations, 3 Palestinian-American sisters begged for help in evacuating their stranded family members in Gaza. Israel has bombarded the densely populated Gaza Strip following the October 7 Hamas attacks on Israeli communities. Authorities in Gaza say 6,546 Palestinians have died since the strikes began. And that's our coverage of Israel-Hamas war this morning. Thank you for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay.